Hi, I'm Katie. I'm one of the co-founders of WeShape. Welcome to our second episode of the WeShape podcast. I'm here with Tyler, the other co-founder of WeShape, and Nina, who is our brand advocate. And I was really excited to be here this week. I felt like last week went really well, and there's like so much to talk about and so many things to unpack. And even this week when I was hanging out with you, Nina, we kept saying, okay, got to bring that up on the podcast. I can't believe, it's like once you open the door to, toxic weight loss culture, toxic body image messages, like every time you open this door, you start to just have this subconscious awareness that just brings it to the conscious state of, oh my gosh, I can't, like I was joking with you the other day about, it's so interesting that all the t-shirts, I'm going to laugh because I'm wearing a black t-shirt right now, but all of us are actually.
Not planned.
All of the t-shirts in my closet are black. Remember I was telling you about this?
Yeah.
And then I was like, why is that? That's kind of weird. I would like to say that I'm like a secret goth at heart, but we all know that's probably not all the way true. Yeah. And then I thought, I wonder if it's because, growing up, I was told that wearing black made you look slimmer. So it's just a color that I always reach for because I'm like, oh, look, my slimmest. And then I was like, oh my gosh, that's terrible. Like I'm missing out on so many colorful t-shirts. And I'm on a mission to buy colorful t-shirts. I'm going to do it.
That's great. I can't wait to see those colorful t-shirts come down the pipeline.
That's going to be a new version of you. There's been a lot of black in your closet for a long time.
I'm going to try.
But I think you bring up a great topic, which, I was thinking about this today, but like fashion being kind of a part of, there's a greater conversation that we're having, of course, about toxic weight loss culture and, the intrinsic underpinnings it has around like racism and sexism, but specifically when I think about fashion, like I think about like if you're more curvaceous, like don't wear stripes because that will make you look like more round, or like God forbid you wear bright colors or patterns because that will draw attention to you, and if you draw attention to yourself, like please, we don't want to have to look at that, and how fashion's been used as a tool for a long time to kind of, I'm gonna go ahead and just say like oppress women. Like my clothes don't have pockets, you guys. None of them have pockets that are usable. Like there's no utility in women's clothing. There's no really comfortability in a lot of ways. If you look back into like fashion from like the 1400s and the Victorian era, et cetera, like women are wearing corsets. Their clothing is meant to look beautiful. It's not meant to be functional. And like that brings in the conversation of like, is that really all we're good for, is looking a certain way? And I just think that comes back to the point.
We do a weekly call with all of our members, and last week we did a Zoom, and remember one of the women on the call said that even her 90-year-old mother was still wearing a corset because she felt, I'm like, this poor woman, can you just enjoy your life?
Get in some PJs, girl.
Yeah, I'm available for that.
I think what this highlights, though, is how deep these roots are, right? Like, if we go back in time, you ask the question, are we only good for our looks, right? And we all know that's not true. But I think a lot of people in the past, like that was the truth that was put out there. You need to look a certain way so you can attract a certain partner, so that you can be taken care of, so that you can. And some of that still weaves forward. I don't know how you guys see it, but I don't know. It seems like the roots are incredibly deep if you examine them.
When I was younger, I had restrictions around what I could wear, because I was told that I was responsible for the thoughts in the boys' minds based on what outfit I wore that day. So I couldn't draw any attention to myself. And it's really interesting now because my poor mother, I shocked her, I think maybe a couple months ago, I forget when this was, when I told her I think maybe my older daughter was wearing a crop top or something. I don't know. She doesn't think about it in that way. She just loved that shirt. And I think it was brought up around like, somehow the topic around what are you going to let your kids wear got brought up. And I said, I don't really know how I feel about that. I don't know that I'll be restricting so much around that, because I feel like what you choose to wear can be an expression of yourself, and I don't want her from a young age to already be self-conscious about, I can't wear that because of this. And I don't know, I always felt really caged. Like I can't wear that skirt, or I can't wear that top. It just felt like I couldn't just be me because I had to manage how everyone would interpret me. And I'm like, that is a really shitty role. I don't want to be the manager of all the people and how they react to what I wear.
Yeah, I remember being in junior high school and like I would wear the same shirt as my girlfriend, and we were built differently, right? You know, some women develop more earlier than others, et cetera. And I got sent home from school one day for wearing the same thing that someone else was wearing, and I remember thinking that was like so awful.
Whoa. I want to understand this, and I want to contact your principal. So you and your friend went to school.
Mm-hmm.
You're wearing the same shirt.
Yes, we were in the same shirt, different colors though, because matching but not matching.
And you got sent home.
Yeah, I got sent to the office, and they had a full conversation with me because I was built as a curvier young woman. I'm a curvy woman today, and
so you had boobs.
I had boobs. That's
okay.
That's a nice way of
Let's
saying
call it what
it.
it
I
is.
had boobs.
Just say it.
It's like I'm trying to police the way I speak.
I'm
about
here
that.
for the boobs.
I had
Let's
boobs,
talk about it.
and she was not built the same way as me, and that shirt was fine on her and not fine on me. And I remember thinking, like, at the time I was like 12, you know, like I didn't really understand what was going on there, but I was told I couldn't wear that because of how I looked. And then it kind of created this longer term thing for me where like I'm like, oh, I look inappropriate in this or that outfit because of the way my body is shaped. And it's a thing I still carry today, like, oh, that looks really nice on you because of the way you're shaped, but the way I'm shaped would look like inappropriate or maybe offensive. And that's like such a weird thing that I carry today.
I'm really not okay with this.
Sometimes you drop down stories, I'm like, oh my God, that's crazy. I mean, that's so unfair to just be someone who matures differently and to be, I guess, punished for it and make you feel like you have to be aware of the way everybody else is thinking about that.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think the other side of that, if you want to kind of turn it on its head, is that I went through a period in high school where I wore a lot more clothing because it kind of made me feel safer. You know, like there wasn't as much. And I know this is like, you know, this is again kind of becoming a conversation around body image, but that was the truth for me. Is if I wore more, then there maybe wouldn't be as many unwanted advancements or questions or perspectives that were uncomfortable and unwanted.
Well, I wonder. And it's making me think about my parents' perspective of their restrictions. Like, we can keep her safer if people aren't preying on her.
Yeah.
It's like, is there that TikTok? Maybe that trend is old, so I'm going to date myself. But the trend around, like, what would you do if there weren't any men on the planet? I'm so sorry to say this one, but people were like, I'd leave my window open at night. I'd wear whatever I want. I
go running at night.
But it does take this is why I actually feel like the men are actually important. Because it takes the men to have this conversation to say, we have a value, or not even a value, but we have a societal norm that says when women dress this way, they should be sexualized, or that it's okay if they're sexualized if they dress this way. And so it actually does take the collective whole and the men to come in and say, I mean, I don't know. Can you chime in as a man? And can you chime in as a man who has 2 daughters?
Yeah. I
so
can
like,
chime
what
in
it?
with
What I mean, like. Because there's a part of me, and I'm actually questioning my own beliefs, but it's great. But I have a belief that I would love for my daughters to be able to wear whatever they want. Like, I think it's actually, maybe it's obviously coming from my own experience of feeling like trapped. But then there is the other side of like, I don't want people like sexualizing them, and I don't want them to feel like they're getting all this negative attention. So like, how do you, but again, that's stemming from this, do you feel like men have a pass to sexualize women when they dress that way?
I think speaking from being a father of 2 daughters and kind of thinking of way maybe your dad felt when you'd walk outside wearing a mini skirt or something like that. It's honestly, it's a struggle because in society there is so much sexualization of women. The more skimpy clothing you're wearing, the more likely you are to get attention, which can then fuel you in this way that makes you want to look a different way, and that probably fuels eating disorders and other things like that. But I also, as a dad of daughters, think to myself, like, I want my kids to just freely express themselves. Like, that's the number one thing I want. Is
but
just
can
to
you
love
think about
themselves.
yourself as a teenage boy?
Yeah, let me finish that.
Okay.
And so where my head goes with this is less about like ultimately the goal is safety, right? Like you mentioned, your dad probably thought, if I give these restrictions, she'll be more safe in the world. She'll be less in these circumstances. And I can see that being the reality. I don't want to like not face the reality that if somebody's wearing something that's skimpier, there's more likelihood of somebody looking at them and feeling those feelings towards them, right? But where I go with it is like, how do I teach my daughters to stand up for themselves, be smart about being in places that feel safe, and also be able to maybe like defend themselves against that. Like, I know you've seen me trying to get these girls into do jiu-jitsu for a long time.
I mean, but it's sad that we even have to say that.
I was just going to say
It's
that.
like, I don't want, I mean, our younger one wants to do jiu-jitsu, so fine. But like, I see us pushing our older one to do it, not because it's because you want her to feel safe. But I'm actually talking about the layer below that. So for me, the layer below that is, do you guys think that there is a societal norm and a pass that we give to men that says it's okay to sexualize women when they dress that way?
I think there's a lot of men out there who are going to take actions from a very like primal place that are probably really not appropriate in today's society.
But do you think that men use that primal? It's primal. Like, do you think that they use that as a little bit of an excuse? Because I think they do use it as a little bit. Like, come on, we're
pretty
evolved.
difficult to say what is society educating us for what is, because I don't know about you, but you open all the magazines, everything's sexualized.
No,
everything,
I want us
TV,
to change as a culture,
the fitness culture,
today.
everything, right? Like that's all teaching us how to show up in the world, right? And then there's underneath that a layer of primal instincts as well. And I don't know what's right and what's wrong in that. It's too difficult to understand what is patterned in via our education.
Well, this is the lifelong
instinctually.
developmental psychology debate. It's
Right.
nature versus nurture.
Sure.
But I do think that sometimes men in particular, I'm sorry to say this, they do sometimes use a little bit of like the nature as a little bit of an excuse to possibly behave inappropriately in that particular context.
Let's make it clear. Behaving inappropriately is the problem, right? If we don't behave inappropriately, then the problem isn't there. So like there's no excuse to behave inappropriately. I want to be clear on that side of things. And part of my stance in the world as a man is to see someone who is behaving inappropriately and say, hey, shape up. That's where I feel called to kind of show up as a man in the world. Say, hey, I don't feel like there's a lot of good male mentors out there that are showing men how to be better men, meaning standing up for women, making sure there's equality across the board, and really like living that. There's usually these subconscious things that are ingrained in us that say, oh, if I get married, she's supposed to do this and she's supposed to do that, these roles and expectations. And I feel like we're at a place in society where a lot of people are starting to say, are these serving us? Are these real? Or are these just things we've inherited from the past, from dead people that we now want to change, right?
I just want to evaluate in how this, we can come back to the body image of this, because I do think that it sucks that like you were sent home because you wore the shirt, because you had breasts. It's because society holds these values and perceptions that are supported. And I think that the only way to have societal shift over time is to bring awareness to them, talk about them. But I'm curious about your opinion, because this is complicated.
It's very complicated. But I think what I was going to say, kind of like, which touches on what both of you were saying, was like that I was reading an article today that was talking about like beauty standards and how it's a cultural conspiracy that we actually uphold and we participate in these beauty standards that are like pillars of a racist and sexist system that keep women particularly focused on things like their looks and how they're eating and how much they're exercising, and like keeps them small and keeps them, you know, if you're hyper focused on what you're eating every day and how much you're exercising and whatever, like your plan to maybe become the next president might not be as likely, you know.
God, it's
like
so
you're
much
focused
energy
on
to
so
do
much
that.
micromanagement of like, well, you know, I've spent whole days being like, what did I eat and when did I eat it and am I going to eat this or that tomorrow?
What am I going to wear?
What am I going to wear?
Now I got to do
So
an extra workout because I had the dessert last night. I mean, that is constant energy management. And you're right. We can't strive for bigger things if we're stuck in that role.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah.
How do we fix it? How do we start to fix it? Other than like, you know, last week we had talked about maybe creating more values around things outside of how you look, right? I know that's a starting point, but it's like you have to get one person to participate at a time, right? And that doesn't mean not showing up and like wanting to wear something that makes you feel like interesting. It means making sure that what you're wearing to feel interesting is important to you, not because you're trying to receive love and attention from someone else.
I mean, I really do think it starts with yourself.
Yeah.
So, and I do believe that we need to hold our society as a whole more accountable. So, like
drop the men bomb. Let's hear it.
No,
Well, no.
I wasn't necessarily gonna say that, but
well, it's different for men and women. I think we have different roles in this particular, which like I want it all to be the same and everyone be equal. But like I think that like for me, I show up in like dismantling this in myself by like letting myself enjoy foods that I want to eat and picking out clothes that make me feel comfortable and happy, and like not letting outside circumstance and the magazines and the constant ad messages and like, I mean, you go to buy toothpaste and like you're basically buying sex. They're like, but it's the pretty skinny girl with the blonde hair brushing her teeth, and I'm like, how is this relevant? Oh my God, like could it be someone who looked different?
I feel so bad. I literally have unfollowed, I don't know, so many. I'm unfollowing
I'm gonna delete
celebrity.
Instagram. I'm like this close.
Yeah, no, because I'm like, you're not serving me. You're not. All you're doing is posting pictures of yourself in a bikini on a beach, and that's okay if that's like once in a while, but that's all your content. I'm not available for this anymore. And
It's
then
an inundation.
I do think, I was even thinking about like, you know how women do the thing where they're just walking down the street and then like a man will say something or comment or make a noise or something? I was watching these funny TikTok videos where this woman, and I don't want to say that people should do this because I am so worried if I say it and someone doesn't and then a man attacks them, I don't want to be responsible for people's safety. But
Oh my gosh.
this woman would do this thing where men would like catcall her and then she would go blah, blah, and like act
I've
crazy
seen that.
to them. She would like act really crazy to them, and then they'd be like, But it's hard because, like for me, I just think that the only way that we can make change is within ourselves. So, if that happened to me, maybe I would say something like, "Excuse me, I'm not available for that. That's super inappropriate." But then I also am scared to do that
safety.
because I'm like, what if that
Safety,
person
yeah.
attacks
Safety.
me?
Well, and that's where I think that men can participate. I think that's where a man can come in and say, "Hey, dude, cut that shit out. That's not
But
appropriate."
I'm so sad that like I need the men to like take care of the men for me. That's just, I'm sad about that. That's such a bummer. But I do think men should do that too. But it's like, I don't know. It's complicated. It's really complicated.
It's complicated. I'm just trying to say that I think that if we had a role in this as men, it would be to stand up for women, right? And just try to make sure that we're not participating in over-sexualization. Like as a father, again, one of the things that I try to do with my children is praise the values in them that I want them to feel really like excited about in themselves. Oh my gosh, you worked so hard on that. Oh my gosh, like that was such a creative idea. I don't sit there and go, oh my gosh, you look so pretty, right? Because the last thing I want is for them to go in the world and seek attention the same way they seek attention from me. Yeah, they find their value from their fathers.
Oh, I would be
it's
karate
important.
chopping you left and right.
He's slapping me and everything.
Did we talk about this last week?
We don't condone violence on this podcast, guys.
Well, no, we don't. I will karate chop you if you comment on my
Gentle
children's looks.
karate chop.
Gentle karate chop.
But did I talk about this last week where they did that psychology study where they dressed the babies up?
Oh God, I'm upset because I have something to say about baby
Let's
clothing.
Let's hear this.
Okay, so there was this. You guys can look it up on YouTube. I'll figure out what it's called. But it was like the psychology class, and they brought in 2 infants. They were under 1 because I don't think they were mobile. And one was dressed as a boy in traditional boy clothes, and one was dressed as a girl. And they said, today we're going to do observation on infants, and we'd like everyone to take out a notebook and write down characteristics of this male baby and this female baby. And they did.
Oh God.
And then at the end, they asked them to say, okay, well, what did you discover about this male baby? And they were like, well, he's pretty strong, and look at his this, and look at his that. And all the characteristics that were describing the male baby were really like masculine traits, and all of the characteristics were described for the female baby as very feminine.
Yeah.
And then they said, psych, this one's actually a girl, and this one's actually a boy.
Nothing to do with the person. It's the clothes.
Yeah.
Wild.
Yeah.
Isn't that wild?
It's intense.
And so you have to think about it that way, in the sense that like those students were in like developmental psychology making studious like research-based decisions or observations around these children based on the clothes that they were wearing. So what do you think comes after you make an observation and a conclusion? What do you think comes next? A behavior or an action? So it's critical to understand that our brain does this. I think that they proved a very, very valuable point. What were you going to say about? You said,
we've been talking about TikTok a lot on this podcast, which tells you a lot about us because we have a nightly ritual of sending each other TikToks while we're in the bathtub. But That's
We've
a different
actually
problem.
joked about can we
Not
have
the same bathtub.
Not the same bathtub, different bathtubs, different houses. Thank goodness.
But I'll call you and I'll be like, hey girl, what's going on? I'll be like, was that a splash?
It was a splash.
And I'm like, I'm in the bath too.
It's a unifying moment that we have in the
We've
evenings.
joked about, are we allowed to have podcasts from like the bathtub? That would be like incredible. Anyway.
Most comfortable.
Go ahead.
We probably have too much water noise.
Yeah.
But what I was going to say, though, is there's a gentleman on TikTok. He's a father. He has an infant daughter. And he was talking about how upset he was when he started shopping for, because men have these like downloads, I think, at points in their life. And you could speak about that. But where, when they have a daughter or they get married or whatever with their mom, they're like, oh, women have value because of my experience with this woman who's important to me, rather than like just intrinsically sometimes. Like I hear men be like, oh, well, it changed for me when I had a daughter. And I'm like, bro, like women have been people this whole time, but I get it that it happens how it happens. But he was basically realizing that infants' clothing is like already so gendered and so like little girls' clothing is like really soft and has ruffles and there's bows and like stuff to make to create this energy around like that they need to be treated a certain way and protected, or in some ways even he saw it for infants like swimwear. Like that you're putting like an infant in a bikini, like which is kind of like a sexy item. Like why would you put a baby in that? Like put them in something that covers their skin for the sun and protects them. And like male children's clothing looks really different and has different utility. And so it was just an interesting thing again where fashion's kind of upholding the body image thing.
The body image,
like the way that we dress. Like if you go to buy
From
a
the day
swimsuit
that you are born.
from the day you're born, and if you go to buy a swimsuit and you're in a certain size range, your swimsuit's going to look a certain way. And if you change that same brand, like there's a couple different websites I buy swimwear from, but some of them will like from sizes 0 to size 10 will have like a certain bikini bottom that goes with the top. And then like once it gets past size 10, the top and the bottom will be the same fabric and the same essential style, but there'll be more coverage, or they'll be like the bottoms will be bigger somehow. Like, well, what if I just wanted the bottoms of that, but just in the size that fits my body?
Interesting.
And they will change it based on like the size of your body.
No, they're creating shame in just size
in fabric.
itself.
It's just a freaking swimsuit.
Wow.
Or like I remember my mom shopping for swimsuits when we were young. She'd go and find the one, and it'd be like a dress. You know what I mean? It wasn't just a swimsuit that you were wearing to go swimming in. It was more of like an outfit that covered as much of herself as she could cover. And I kind of that's kind of a full circle thing on the fashion thing, but like it just blows my mind how so many systems uphold the system of toxic weight loss culture and this like body shaming energy we bring to so many aspects of life.
And it's all, you're not even aware.
Well, it's decided for us.
Yeah.
I've been super interested in dissecting toxic weight loss culture and, women become, historically being oppressed and all this stuff. And I just discovered last week that I have all of these black clothes in my closet because I think they make me look thinner. And I wasn't even consciously realizing that I was buying it from that space and that I had always done that. So
we talked about, making decisions from a place of self-love rather than a place of self-judgment. We talked about it in relationship to, a fitness routine last week, and we're talking about clothes a lot this week. So just my question that I'm curious about is, not throw out your black clothes, but how do you make a decision from a place of self-love? And I'll just make a comment here that, I think, for example, I've seen Nina have more expression with the clothes that you're willing to wear and more confidence in that than I would typically see Katie having as much expression and confidence in that. And I'm just curious, how do you then make this decision? So you're aware of the problem, then you make the decision, but are you making the decision still with parts of the roots in there for that reason?
Well, to be honest with you, I'm actually petrified to tell women, go wear whatever, because I'm like, oh
You're
no,
too afraid of the sexualization.
am I gonna have some woman be like, fuck this, I'm gonna throw this shirt away and wear this thing, and then some guy's gonna prey on her and attack her. I'm always worried about that. So it's a weird balance because, like I said, with my own daughters, I don't want them to feel like constricted in their ability to express themselves through the clothes that they wear. And then I'm also now understanding maybe more why my parents did that. But I don't have the answer. I don't know.
It's hard. I think that, as parents, we don't want our children to face incredibly difficult things, but the reality is the world is a judgmental, unkind place. And you had mentioned, as a dad becomes a father to a daughter, he has this heightened awareness around a female's experience. And that was mine as well. And it wasn't that I said, oh, now women have more value to me. I always feel like I've had some sense of everybody deserves the right to, be whoever they want to be. But having daughters made me realize maybe in a karmic sense too, like how often I showed up poorly in my youth, how often I held up that societal narrative and contributed to someone feeling bad or insecure or whatever, because I was taught that that was right, and because everybody was participating in that. And now I go, God, how many things would I have done differently had I had the awareness that I was speaking to someone who deep down inside still has that little girl that just wants to be seen and loved for who they are inside, not outside.
I mean, I've told any of my friends who have recently been pregnant with boys, especially white males, like, whew, you got a big responsibility in our society because we got to do it a different way. We can't keep doing it this way. It's like painful to watch now when you start to see all of the, I mean, like you even sent, when we were talking about the podcast topics, like you had sent me something about how Victoria's Secret was even owned by a man.
Oh yeah, he lives in Ohio. He's an old white dude. He invented the company and is still, like, I think the main person who owns it.
And don't you think, though,
I think the bra was invented by a man. I should probably fact check that, but I'm reasonably certain that the brassiere, which is its full name, was invented by a man.
I'm gonna look that up.
Yeah,
I'm gonna look that up right now.
I'm pretty sure.
But I mean, I also think that women have to. This is why it's really important to have awareness, to have connection with self, and to take time and pause when we can to have intention.
Yeah.
Because I do think women also have a responsibility, right? Like, if, no one is forcing any woman to work for Victoria's Secret. I mean, we're all participating.
Oh, I bought something from them the other day, and I was like, damn it.
Yeah.
Like, it's so hard to, like, walk through to navigate the world in a way in which you're voting with your dollar the right way and you're making the right decisions. It's very, very challenging.
I think what it highlights, though, is, like, intention seems to be a theme we keep talking about, right? And oftentimes if we dig into our intentions or our why we're doing something, we find something different than we actually think we're intending, right? And so as an example, we might put the clothes on. Well, I want to put this on because it makes me feel this way. Oh, because I feel that way because somebody shows up differently when I do that. Oh, so I'm still seeking love and attention outside of myself, and this is the vehicle by which I get that.
I think with women it's
right?
particularly challenging, rather, because, like, I want to wear pajamas every day, like I want to wear something comfortable that feels, like, enjoyable on my body. But, like, there's a level of, and you might be able to speak to this in a different way, but there's a level of expectation around women looking a certain way when they walk out in the world, like professionalism, for instance, like look sexy, but not too sexy, be taken seriously, but not so seriously that no one, like, really enjoys you because you're boring or flat or whatever. Like, you have to find this, like, fine line. There's a kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't dance that I think women have to do. Like, if you throw on a suit, everyone's like, dang, guy's looking dapper, you know what I mean? And, like, that's it. But when we have to navigate choices for fashion for certain events, there's like a million different checklists I go through. I'm like, okay, it's a wedding, so the dress has to be this length, but it's cocktail, so it has to be a certain color. Like, it's just a full-on thing.
If I do this, then somebody will think that. If I do this, then somebody will judge me this way.
I can't upstage someone else who's there. I can't really blah, blah, blah. Like, again, it's just these systems that we participate in. And, like, I'm not saying that we shouldn't be conscientious when we're dressing ourselves, but, like, it's a challenge. It's a challenge to continuously show up in a way that, like, is authentic to who I am and how I want to present myself in the world, and to check those motivations and that intention, like you're talking about, and to also, like I said, make decisions where you're not, like, supporting an industry that is harming you or adding to the problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best thing we can do, and all that we can really do, is show up and try to better understand and do the best we can. And I am guilty of this as well, but, like, not necessarily playing the blame game.
Yeah.
But saying, okay, this is a part of our societal norm. This isn't one person who's responsible for this belief or this value system or this way that we operate in society. It's a collective acceptance, a collective participation in it. And so I'm not going to play the blame game, but I'm going to recognize where it comes from systemically. And then I'm going to take accountability and responsibility for any way that I contribute to it. And I'm going to do my best to be mindful in my intention and how I show up in whatever cycle that might be.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I think that's all you can. I don't know. I mean, maybe there's more that we could do, but I think that's all we can do.
It's big. You said something powerful there that I think is could be really helpful for people. Is like there's points of my life where I've made decisions where I go, oh, I was such an idiot. I wish I would have made a different decision.
Care to share any of this?
Yeah,
I think everyone's asking.
How much
You
time?
know you thought it.
5
Yeah.
hours, right?
But when you do that, and then you feel really bad about yourself and you beat yourself up, when you sit in that for long enough and you have enough space between that action, you start to realize how much of who we were was done out of conditioning, right? We all are born and we're put in these outfits and they say boys look strong and you can do anything you want, and they put girls, oh, you look so cute, oh yeah, you're a good little girl, right? And then we start to believe those things, we start to carry those things through with us. And I think what's important is to recognize the conditioning, meaning we didn't choose this, it was given to us and we are just upholding it, and take some space, like you said, with the intention to say, what do I genuinely want to do? How do I genuinely want to show up, and do it consciously? How do you parent consciously? How do you dress consciously with the right intention, right? How do you join a fitness routine for the right reasons rather than the wrong reasons? Again, always out of self-love rather than self-judgment or fear.
Yeah, and I do think it's important for men to share where they do feel like they have faltered, and where, God, we've had a lot of motorcycles and sirens today. I just want to call that out. It's annoying. It's downtown. But I do think it's important, like if you ever feel called to share any of your lessons, because I'm joking with you, but because I don't want you to sit in shame or blame, because shame or blame, that doesn't actually do anything, in my opinion. It kind of just makes the problem the problem still exists, and then you just feel like shit about yourself. I think that anytime we can acknowledge where we felt like, wow, society really shaped me and set me up to show up this way, and now as I grow and evolve and learn more about myself, I'm realizing that I wish I would have done it differently, and now I know, right? But keeping those lessons in, I think I think you could be an inspiration to other people if you ever feel called to share the ways that you did that.
It's a tricky dance, I think, at the end of the day. I feel like, I'm probably the person who's got the target on him the most in this podcast, for sure. And I think that, if it's difficult sometimes to be honest and transparent about things that you might have made mistakes in, because it can paint you in a really negative light. But the reality is, who we all were a year ago is not who we are today. And, one of the things that's challenging for me to watch about cancel culture is there's no level of forgiveness for who people were, and no recognition of maybe the work that's been done.
Yeah.
And
no, I don't.
It's a tough one.
There's no pressure. And I don't want to put you on the spot. I'd love for you to be able to think about that more. So like maybe in a future podcast, if you were, hey, I was raised as a white male in this society. This is a belief that I felt I was okay with. This is how I showed up in that belief, and this is what I've learned from that and how I've attempted to make change. So no pressure to talk about any of those life lessons today, because I do understand it is a tricky time. We don't have a lot of forgiveness, and I think if we're going to do this podcast and talk about things like toxic weight loss culture and body image and female oppression and racism and all of these different things that really are kind of heavy topics, I think it is hard, because with that we do invite, targets. And so I know that, Nina and I have had this conversation a number of times, like, how do we show up in a mindful space? How do we create curiosity? I never want to be the authority in this. I'm really here just to try to understand and provoke question and get perspective, which is part of the reason I also want to have guests on the podcast. I have a couple of guests lined up, actually, because I want to better understand people's experiences. I was watching Michelle Obama's documentary. I forget what it was. I'm so bad with titles of remembering all these things, but I was partway through one of her documentaries. I think she has a couple. I don't know. It was the documentary on when she went on her book tour. And she was talking about how, stories over statistics. And I think she was really just, she was really just trying to highlight that, like, behind all these statistics, there's human beings and there's stories. Yeah. And so I really want to also remind us of that too, that I'm like, what a good reminder that there are people who have so many important stories to share that can make us think in a different way. And again, I think it is about how do we hear stories and allow learning opportunities to come in, instead of sitting in shame, like, oh, I made that mistake and I can't tell anyone. It's like, but it is hard, because now you're also bringing up a good point that when we get vulnerable and share these mistakes, that then there's also a target for people to cancel you. And then
Yeah, you know me. I'll get as raw and vulnerable as you want to get, but you got to be judicial about that. I mean,
Nina's like, I'm not riding home in the car with them.
Yeah. I'm probably the most emotional person at this table, So, anyways,
you're a triple water sign.
Oh yeah,
just gonna call that out.
Big time.
Feelings.
Yeah.
We're here for it.
One thing I want to say is that the reason why I was interested in this podcast and having this discussion, and I would also say the reason why that we're running this business WeShape together in the first place, is to kind of right a wrong that I do feel that I was participating in, and I'm super happy to be transparent about that. Like, I grew up as an overweight kid, and I was fat shamed by my friends and my brother and society, and it fucked me up a lot. And part of it along the way put this big chip on my shoulder that said, I'll show you. And then I changed the way I looked, and society said, thumbs up, you look this way. And people start asking, how do you look this way? And so I started telling people how to look that way. And then I started building programs and selling them online. And I was a part of the problem.
And you were targeting the weight loss.
I was targeting weight loss. I was targeting, don't you hate this part of your body, don't you, whatever, right? And it was because at the time, I believed that's what we were supposed to do. The success looks like changing the way you look, right? And sure enough, that's just a mask, because no matter how successful I was in any of the ways that I was measured, it didn't genuinely make me happy, right? What genuinely makes me happy is connecting with myself and making decisions from a place of, who am I really? Who do I really want to be? And along the way, you start to realize, I don't want to participate in this anymore. I don't want to be someone who propagates this narrative anymore. And especially when you have little girls and you see this world where you're like, I'm doing this, I'm selling this product, it's a great product, but I'm playing on people's insecurities in order to get them to take action on it. And then you become aware of that. If you're aware of that, how long can you go before your soul just starts to die, right?
Yeah, I mean, even when we built the newer product that was definitely focused more on how do you feel, like, our product has that feature where you can scale up or scale down, like even tiny micro movement progressions, so you can be like extremely customized. Even with those things, we still had like what we call motivational cues. So your voice was in the product saying, you can do it. And like, sweat is just your fat crying. And
right.
We even had to stop and be like, oh, do we really want to motivate people, or why don't we inspire people? So even one of our current product iterations is actually Nina. We did all of her voiceover to have more inspirational things versus like, we have to motivate you. It's like, we don't
motivate you through teaching you to judge yourself.
Right.
Yeah,
teaching you to feel shitty about yourself.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that side of it and just taking ownership of that. And I think that, you and I have been in this dialogue for a number of years and have had very challenging conversations and almost like debates. Because for years I was on the other side going, I don't feel fulfilled in this, and something doesn't feel right, and I don't want to market this way, but I never left. I kept doing it with you. So like, I have to take response. You know what I mean? It's like, that's what I mean when it's so easy. I could have just blamed you and said, well, I needed to show up and run the business, and I tried to tell him, but he didn't listen, and I could really do that. And I think that the only way we actually make progress is to take radical responsibility.
Yeah.
And at any point I could have said, if this is the way you want to market to people, I'm walking out of the company tomorrow. And I never did that. So I have to take ownership in that too.
But I think what you both need to remember a little bit about that time period is that you were both taught that.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
I know.
you were taught that in different ways, we participate in these things because that's what we were told. Like, when someone says something like, I'll boot camp at me, I'm like, right, totally. I got to like, no pain, no gain. Like, that's something that's been carried for such a long time.
Yeah.
So to break this, pattern in your guys' existence already is really like an accomplishment.
One of the patterns in men that we're taught is like, your worth is related to your success, is related to what you're able to produce, provide, etc. And like, I hook, line, and sinkered into that until I was like, this isn't helping our relationship. This isn't making anybody happy, right? And at the end of the day, again, that's that conditioning, that conditioned self that comes out and shows up over and over again until we say, hold up a second, this isn't who I want to be, right? I want to be somebody who not only builds something that can really help people, but does so in a way that inspires them to do it from a place of self-love rather than self-judgment. Sorry, I'm going to say that like 1 million times on this podcast because it's a very important theme, I think, for what it is that we're trying to do here.
Well, I appreciate, the ownership and the lesson and trying to do it a better way. I mean, we're still, even in our product now, I'm dissecting every little thing. Are we trying to inspire people and tell people to connect with themselves and make sure that they're doing, things not for punishment but for the right intention. And I'm sure people will still buy our product today and use it for the wrong reasons, but I'll still do my best to put the message out there that, we want you to use our product as an act of self-care and self-love, and not as a place of punishment or, like you said, like I gotta have pain in order to, I don't want that. And we'll just continue to, when you know better, you do better.
Yeah.
And, it is a good reminder that everyone is just doing the best that they know how. And we'll continue down that path. So
all I want to do is continue to improve how I'm showing up, and for myself and for my children, and that means future generations. So the way that you guys show up and the way that you become parents is what you pass on to the next generation. So we ask about how do we change this, and you said change it in ourselves. That's really important. We got to change it in ourselves, but we have to change it in ourselves so that others can see that and change it in themselves. If we have children, they can see that. I mean, your dad says this all the time, more is caught than taught. So I constantly think about, like, is it important that I tell my children all these different things, or is it important that they see these things and they see why I'm doing these things?
Yeah, they don't care what you say.
They don't care
Sorry
what you
about
say.
that.
Right?
They don't care what I say either.
But there's an intention.
It's
like
what I do.
I take the girls to the gym to be around fitness, just so they can be around it, and they get to watch their dad practice things for the joy of moving his body, not to try and punish himself. I sit in the living room in my meditation, not because I want to be bothered by them in the morning when they wake up, right? Because I want them to walk out and see it, and then I get to invite them to join me so that they can start seeing these patterns. And I think that the more conscious we are about how we live our lives for ourselves, to our truest selves, and the more we put that on display in front of other people, the more likely we are to create a little seed. We just plant that little seed, and that's what ultimately will change this narrative.
Yeah, and I always trip out because I feel like there's always this idea of like, okay, I'm going to do it this way now because this is the better way, but we actually thought that before too. So I'm always like, okay, what's next?
I've been thinking about this a lot
To be
too.
committed to learning.
Yeah.
Committed to being willing to make a mistake.
There's never an end.
No. I thought cigarettes were good for you at one point.
It's funny when you start to peel back the layers of yourself, right? And you peel back a layer, and then you're this new self. And I'm so guilty of this. It's ridiculous. I have so much awareness of who I am right now. This is me. And then a little time goes by, and you peel back another layer. I have so much awareness. This is me. And then another layer.
One day.
Wait a second.
One day on the podcast, we'll go through what I call the Tyler phases. They're my favorite because what I love about you most
is a two-parter.
It's that.
It's going to be a quarterly theme. There's going to be something we have to go over and over again.
We have to reintroduce you every quarter.
I move fast, right? And I go all in on everything that I do. So, it's going to show up.
It's entertaining for all of us. And
we're having a good time.
Yeah, no, I do appreciate it, though. I mean, the only constant really is change. And so I do think, but I do think about that. Like right now, I'm like, okay, I'm, showing up in this way. This is better than the way I was before. This is it. And then it's like, nope, in more time, you're going to see that there's actually even a better way.
An even better way, yeah.
So all we have to do is, I think, be open-minded and check our intentions and be curious about what's next, and not finalized in our methodology. So
and kind. I feel like I have to say that a lot, because when we do live coaching with our members, when I have dialogues with anybody out there who has an interest in improving themselves and growing, the common theme among so much of our suffering is unkindness to ourselves, is self-judgment, right? It's instead of me being like, I kind of whiffed on this one thing, like, it's okay, everybody, makes mistakes or doesn't adhere to the plan they said to sometimes. Instead of that, it's like, I'm a this, I'm a that, I'm this, and then that becomes a part of your sense of self. And you carry that with you. I'm a little bit of a failure. I'm a little bit of this. And like one of the things, I think we were talking about this earlier today even, was one of the things that I feel like is really a focus in my journey right now is, instead of hearing someone say to me like, this is a selfish part of you or whatever, and me being like, no, I'm not selfish. I'm actually kind and compassionate and all this stuff, is to go, wait a second. Oh yeah, there is a slice of my pie that's selfish. And that's okay. We all are. It shows up in everybody. And how do we have the same appreciation for those sides of ourselves as we do for the kind and compassionate sides of ourselves? Not because we want to be that, but because we want to accept who we are. Does that make sense?
I think that I would even take that challenge to the next step and say,
dun, dun, dun.
so, you know, I think about sometimes when I've had, like, made a mistake, and then I beat myself up over the mistake, and then I say, okay, well, I can give myself kindness. I would actually say there's another step in there. And that step in there is to just call out the elephant in the room. So like if you made a mistake with another person, instead of saying, okay, it's okay, Katie, you're growing, you're learning, you got this, move on. I actually think there's an important step of going to the person and saying, hey, I just want to say that I made this mistake and I don't want to brush over it, and I want to acknowledge that this may have impacted you, and I just want to take ownership of it.
Have I not atoned for something? Is this an intervention right now?
This is a hint.
We'll talk about that after.
I agree with you fully. I think that's a great step.
I think that people are very afraid to do that. And the times that I've done that, though, it's never let me down. It's actually really, that's when, it's kind of like when you do that and you're really vulnerable with somebody and they're receptive of that, which I can't promise that people necessarily would be, because sometimes vulnerability really scares people. But if there's any reception to that type of vulnerability and ownership, it almost makes the acceptance of yourself and your mistake even a little bit easier to understand and manage and accept. I don't know if that makes sense. But there have been a couple times with people even recently in my life where I felt like, oh, I didn't like the way that I showed up there, and I'm just going to call it out.
Yeah.
And that exercise of acknowledging it and bringing it to that person directly felt very, very scary.
Yeah.
But once I could move through that fear and just lean into ownership and vulnerability, the kindness for myself just kind of flooded in afterwards.
Right. Like, you've accepted responsibility for the part that you played a role in.
Right? I think that something interesting happened to me recently, and like I this has been a beautiful discussion around a lot of different topics, but one of them being like relationships. And like we talked earlier about like things we can do to show up differently. And recently, I totally have to tell on myself, I was having a bad body image day, because that happens. And I was like, ugh, I feel fat today, or I look fat today. And somebody heard me say that. And they were like, excuse me, like, may I stop you for a moment? And they gave me some feedback about that. And at the time I was like really kind of embarrassed, because, you know, I was kind of just like in my head talking to myself sort of thing, and didn't really think like it would mean that much. And most of the times you say something like that, maybe your girlfriend or whomever you're with will be like, oh, me too, girl, totally relate. And they were like, no, we're not talking to ourselves like that. And I was, of course, like a little bit like shy and vulnerable that I had made that obvious mistake when I'm someone who's trying really hard to dismantle that kind of behavior. And but I think, you know, I thank them for it, right? Like it was so helpful to like have that experience where someone called me out for doing something unkind to myself. And like I think that we take things at face value really frequently. Like you want to kind of create connection with people, and like we've been discussing relationship and how we connect with people. And when they did that, I wanted to be like, oh, that was like, I wanted to turn away and be like, oh yeah, sorry, I didn't even really mean that. But like I did say it, and I did at that time kind of feel it. And like when they called me out, it was this moment where I could create connection with them, where I was able to hear them and be grateful for that, and then like practice being a little kinder to myself. And they helped me do that. And I think if we can be really kind, like you said, to each other, and kind of call in, someone said that recently and I love that so much, call in rather than call out. You know, we were talking about cancel culture, et cetera. Like call in and be like, hey, like, did you mean to say that about yourself right now? Like that's really harmful and like sad. Are you like having a bad day? Can we talk? Or whatever. And like it really helped me a lot. I was really grateful for it. As embarrassed and ashamed as I felt in that initial moment, it really helped me. And I like have been carrying that with me for like a couple weeks now, where I'm like, yeah, I really didn't mean to say that about myself. That was really unkind. And sometimes that outside perspective from a person that isn't ourselves can really help. And I think that's one of those ways we can make a difference in our community, is when you see someone talking about themselves or using exercise as punishment or changing the way they dress because of how whatever, like you can be like, hey, let's check in, like in a kind way.
Yeah,
let's touch on that. Like, so sorry, I want to be super, like, I want to examine this a little bit. And like, if somebody goes, oh, I look whatever, right? And then their friend says to them, oh, no, you don't. You look great. Does that actually solve any problems?
No, it doesn't.
It actually totally makes it worse.
Right? So
I recently
the delivery is like everything, right?
And it's hard because it's awkward. Right. And so that's what I'm trying to encourage people, like move through the awkward, move through the shame wanting to tell you not to be vulnerable, like moving through that stuff I think is hard. But I think that once you get reps, it does get a little easier. But even, I don't know, months back, I had gone on a weekend away with one of my dear friends who had recently had a baby. And she was saying so many negative things about her body. because I don't think, she wasn't embracing, which that's a totally different episode.
That's a podcast.
Yeah.
But she had a hard time embracing her body through the pregnancy and after the pregnancy. And the whole time, and I just thought to myself, I really had this moment of, if I tell her no, is that really, no, you don't worry about that. That's not I was like, that's not going to help. And eventually I just said, hey, I want to share that the way you're speaking of yourself feels like, I don't want my friend to talk that way about herself. And it's really painful for me to watch. And I think she was pretty open and receptive to that. And it came from a place of vulnerability and love, and not a place of trying to make her feel bad about herself further or shame in what she was saying, but a genuine place of, hey, don't talk to my friend like that.
Yeah.
And so I was, but I remember feeling really anxious and like, do I say something? Because she keeps saying these things about herself, but I feel like I wish she could embrace these parts of herself. And I was also like, I wish our society could embrace these things. And then I finally just got vulnerable with her and said, hey, can you not talk to my friend that way? Like, that is really hurtful for me to see.
So to be clear on those tools, because I think they're so useful. I heard you say that one tool, if somebody's, self-deprecating themselves or judging themselves, is to say, hey, I'm curious, did you really mean that? And give them a chance to think about what they're really saying, and help create that awareness in them. And I heard you say something even different, which I also liked, which is, hey, when you say those things about yourself, like, it makes me, feel sad about what you're saying about my friend. And then they have a moment again to create that awareness about what they're saying about themselves.
Well, because right? I would never, I never even thought that about her.
Yeah.
And I was thinking in that moment, why is it okay for her to say that about herself, but I would never say those things about her? I would never look at her that way. I'm like celebrating her birth and her baby and her new body, And so I just kept thinking, what if she could see her the way I see her?
Or borrow your voice, really. Yeah. Like, speak with a voice that's kind like yours towards herself. Because I know it's easy for me to be like loving on my friends, but then I look in the mirror, I'm like, there could be some improvements, But I think of my best friends, and I don't feel that way at all.
I know. I was talking with this woman that is in business, and we were having this conversation. She was like, I love the mission that you have, and isn't it so crazy that we look at other people and just go, oh my gosh, I love this about them. I love this about them. Like, look at this thing about them. But then when we go to look at ourselves in the mirror, it's like, it's usually, I hate this. I wish I could change this. But it's funny because like other people aren't looking at us in that way, and it's complicated.
I mean, there are supermodels who are like, my fingers are too long, like it's just so sad.
I know. Yeah. It doesn't end. But I think a little bit more compassion for other, and compassion for self, and kindness for other, and kindness for self can go a long way. And I know that these are really, really difficult roots to dig up. But I'm glad that we're having the conversation about it, and I hope that we can all be more curious and compassionate for ourselves and for other people. And I think that that's where this all starts. So thank you guys again for being willing to have these harder conversations. And I'm excited to bring other people on the podcast where they can share their stories as well.
Absolutely.
All right. Be vulnerable. Be kind to yourself.
It's going to get weird.
Right? Yeah. It's going to get interesting.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us. We actually hope to hear from people eventually. Hopefully by the next podcast, I'll be able to have an email where everyone can email in, because I want to hear other people's stories about how this culture has impacted them, maybe in a negative or even positive way, and what we can do to create change. So I'll keep you guys posted about that next time. And until then, we look forward to connecting with everyone out there next week.
All right.
Take care.